Criss, why don't you introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about you, and then we'll kick it over to Ryan.
Yeah, absolutely. So Criss Neimann, I've been with Shure for just over 10 years now, and I lead our market development team in the central and western U.S. A little bit about myself. I love the outdoors.
Nice. Yeah, that makes two of us, buddy. Ryan, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, please?
Yep, Ryan Budvitis, and I am on Criss's team. So Criss is the boss man, and market development. Our purpose is to really be the end user facing arm and helping, figure out what best solutions are for our customers. And yeah, I'm out in Southern California. So, California right now is doing its thing weather-wise, but it's still ever as expensive as it is. So, that's
I
my
know
little
that.
thing, trying to just survive out here. So,
I get it.
happy to be here.
I get it. Criss, where did you say where you're based? I'm sorry if I missed it.
Yeah, so I get to live in Wyoming. I live in
Oh,
Cheyenne, Wyoming, and which means I'm on a plane all the time somewhere, but that's the nature of the business.
so it goes, man. Beautiful areas, both of you guys. We've got people all over. Just a couple Phoenix, Twin Cities, my fellow Minnesotans. How are you? So the people are checking in from all over. It looks like we have mostly systems integrators on the call, and everyone is at least somewhat familiar, if not very familiar with Shure. There are a couple of people who said they are new to Shure, so they'll get to see some stuff too. I'm gonna flip over and make sure I got my Q&A up so I can keep an eye on that stuff, you guys. And I know, Ryan, you've got a slide deck that I know we want to go through. For everyone who's been on the call with us, we really try to make this, not a death by PowerPoint thing. The visuals help us get it across. The way you can interact with us is definitely keep going on in the chat, but get those questions across and shoot them over, and we will put them in where they make sense. And that helps kind of spool and steer the conversation for you guys to keep it relevant. So with that, Ryan, why don't I let you kick this off and dive into the deck a little bit, and I'll start dropping the questions in.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So we have here the beginning part of this is that new year, new products, and new innovations. So the new year portion of this is the fact that we just started our fiscal year back in June. So we're at the beginning of our new fiscal year. And new products is obviously the MXW Next 2, which is the big, showcased the hero product at Infocom, and as well as talking about some, innovations that we have been or going to be releasing in terms of MXA products, as well as, Intellimix Room and some firmware updates. And so that is kind of the agenda here. First, going to be going over the MXW Next 2. We're also going to be talking about some partnerships that are relevant to both Shure and Starin. And then at the end, Criss is going to be talking about the upcoming MXA and Intellimix updates from the Innovation Lab, which was a big hit at Infocom for us. So excited to kind of go over all of this. But to give it a start here, talking about the Microflex Wireless Next 2, our all-in-one, or like I like to say, the all-you-need wireless microphone system. And I wanted to have this slide. So I did a talk at Infocom about, can a wireless mic be simple enough for real people? And I really wanted to touch upon that because, my history in the AV industry was starting out as a sales guy whose like technical knowledge was the backseat, diving in with our customers, figuring out what the pain points were, understanding what they were looking for, and really diving into that relationship, with these real people, if you will, was kind of my focus. And obviously working for Shure and ending up on the market development team, my technical knowledge has continued to grow and grow and grow. But that focus on our customer, because our customer really is truly at the center of what we do. And as we believe is Shure, like we can't innovate unless if our customers push us to. And so that is kind of like the sentiment around this product of the MXW Next 2. And who is it for? This is for anybody trying to set up corporate government training spaces, education lecture halls, all hands meetings, even through an AV rentals here. But, really it is for somebody who wants to set these systems up, but who are not like AV, like they don't have the technical chops to put together a really robust system, because wireless can be really complicated, as we all know. Like it can be. So it's creating this system that is easy enough for almost anybody to do. And really a little bit of the history here is, Microflex Wireless since 2013. So we've been doing this for a while. It's not like this is something that's brand new. This is just a new iteration. And we got there by having these frequent customer demands of over the last decade plus, fewer hardware components, a simpler, more affordable solution, something that picks the frequencies for you. I mean, that's a huge part, like not having to be like, oh, where am I? What do I need to do frequency wise? Just having something that automatically does that, an all-day battery runtime, as well as having some audio processing on board. And that is what we've created in this with the all-in-one design. What you see here is this access point that is also the charging bay. Obviously, you see the transmitters that are, being charged right now, but also inside of this is the onboard DSP. And it is just an absolute unit in terms of what it can do. So, just to kind of breeze over some of this, the improved mics, where you has an LCD screen now, where you can see the battery runtime. You see here that it does have in between 17 and 28 hours, depending on what form factor transmitter you're using, but shows you everything. And if you have like what room it's in, who's using it, so on and so forth. So that's really, really cool. Full suite of I/O. You got analog ins and outs. You have USB audio. So this is going to be your connection to your PC, to your Zoom rooms, to your Teams rooms. We have power. We have, your Dante connections, ins and outs. And I love this slide because it really kind of shows, it's almost like a Swiss Army knife. And that's really kind of what this product is, what it can actually do. You see here the USB in and outs, obviously, to the video conferencing portion of that. You have your, Dante's ins and outs to, speakers, external DSPs, bringing in our ceiling microphones, some really, really cool things that you can do, as well as, your analog ins and outs. And then just this deck, well, this is not like an actual connection. It just shows like that communication between the actual transmitters and the devices, which can be kind of swapped. Like you can have a scenario where you have a bunch of these in a kind of a rollout, and you could have, someone rent like, oh, I need 2 handhelds today. And you go bring them to whatever room they're in, you plug them in there, you link them to that room for that day, and you're off to the races. And then you bring them back to the next day, they need 2 lapels. Next day, they need boundaries, or so on and so forth. So it's really, really cool.
Hey, Ryan, I'm going to step in here real quick. We've got a couple of questions rolling already. So
absolutely.
I will be sure to slide them in. This one made some sense to me. So Sean asked, shout out Sean, regular on the show. Can these be daisy chained to get to like a set together so you can get more than just a pair per room or system? Or is this kind of meant to be standalone on the 2? And if you need more inputs, then maybe it's like a Microflex wireless thing, or what's kind of the positioning there?
Absolutely. And as this stands currently, it's a 2-channel wireless system. So this is for that 2 channels. I will say that at Shure, we're always innovating, and we're always taking note of what's being said. But yes, it would be a scenario where it would, if you needed 4 A channels, our Microflex wireless system is still available and still a killer product.
So Sean, there you go, buddy. If you need more than 2, Microflex wireless would be the kind of way to go. I appreciate that. We've got some more I'll work in, but I'll let you keep going and I'll plop them in.
No, absolutely. And thank you for that, Sean. Yep. And it's just, the onboard DSP here, which again, I mean, if any of you are familiar with Shure, you're familiar with the P300. And this is just a version that's like a little bit, has less than what the P300, but can still accomplish so much, and which really makes this a powerful 2-channel wireless system. And now to get into kind of the fun parts about this is the room diagrams and the system configurations, and really coming back to that question of, can a wireless system be simple enough for real people, and how this thing is like in its core. Anybody can set this up. Like if you have a scenario where you have a classroom, auditorium, all hands meeting, a training room, and you're just looking for sound reinforcement, I mean, it is simple as you have the system plugged into power, and you have it's like powered speakers in a room, and you're just plugging that into the analog connection in the back. and you're off to the races. It's extremely simple. Anybody can set this up in terms of that type of scenario. And then another scenario that is basically you're adding in video conferencing where you have a similar scenario. You have this all hands, something along that nature. And you also want to be able to flew this into a Zoom meeting or a Teams meeting, and you just have the same exact setup as before. Again, anybody can do it. And now you're just taking that USB connection to your compute, and you're off to the races. So it is really like anybody can do this. You don't need any specialized knowledge, anything like that. It's extremely, extremely simple. So it really is simple enough for real people.
I love it. Real people. Ryan, we had a quick question. Somebody just asked. I think you answered it in one of the slides, but I just want to confirm the Dante channel count. Is it 2 in, 2 out?
So it is going to be, well, it is, it's Criss, help me out there. Is it 1 in, 1 out, or is it 2 in, or?
Yeah. Why don't you go back to that slide that shows the processing? Yep. Right there.
Yeah.
And one more next. Forward, where we're actually showing the inside of the processing. There we go.
Yeah.
So as you can see, there's our as far as inputs go, the 2 mic inputs are the actual microphone inputs of the Next 2 system. There's a separate analog input that you could bring something else in. There are 2 Dante inputs here, as well as, of course, your USB input. On the output side, you can see the yellow boxes there, 2 analog outputs, 2 Dante outputs, 3 Dante outputs. There's a USB output, and then that back channel output that's an interesting feed that can go back to the transmitters. Our transmitters, like the boundary mic and or the body pack, you can actually plug a set of headphones into and have a back channel go back to there. So out of the box, like Ryan said, it's set up to have wireless mics come through the system, straight through the analog outputs. And if that's all you use it for, it's simple, it's easy. Or you can step up and it has this other processing power built in. Hopefully that answers the question.
It definitely does. Shout out, Alicia. You let us know if we got the question answered for you. I think that did do it. I appreciate you guys expanding on that. We had, I think there was another one, wasn't there? Yes. Jorge wants to know what's the range of the system? What's the range of the microphones? I'm guessing we're just going by typical deck standards and it's going to follow that, or is there any special consideration to take here in terms of connectivity, the wireless connectivity?
Yeah, I can jump in on that. If you're familiar with our MXW system, the MXW system, we say it's about 150-foot range radiating out from around that access point that would be installed on the wall or in the ceiling. It's similar with this system, but note that access point is all in one, right? It's in the charging base station, it's the DSP, and that thing is probably going to be sitting maybe inside the lectern in a higher ed lecture hall, or maybe on a cadenza that's in a boardroom somewhere. So yes, you're right. It will be attenuated just naturally because of where it's sitting, but it's meant to be easy to access, easy to put away. And so you're still going to get a similar range. It will just be attenuated a little bit. Your mileage may vary. Don't put it in a metal rack. Don't put it inside a metal lectern. Make sure it's out and exposed somewhere.
Criss, I feel like you've been working with systems integrators for a while, huh? Everything's got to go in a metal rack somewhere. Come on. I
know. Hopefully this looks nice enough. It'll just sit up there and look pretty.
The first time I saw it, I was really blown away. I think it does look great and fits great. So thank you guys for the clarification on that. Jorge, I hope that answers your question. Ask us for some clarification if some is needed, but thank you guys. Ryan, why don't you, let's kind of take a look at how it functions and what it can do.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and the last portion of this is like, what else can the MXW Next 2 system do that is kind of beyond that anybody can do this? This would require a little bit extra know-how, but it's not breaking your brain. And this is a scenario where you are utilizing this, like Criss mentioned, like you're utilizing those Dante ins and those outs, and you have a scenario that is very similar to what you've seen so far. You have your Next 2 system, you have that going USB, but now you have a larger space, and you want to have like this kind of auditorium-esque scenario for education, where it is You have the next two system up at the lectern, but you also want to have an audience pickup here. And so you have, our MXA 920 in this space covering everyone who's just sitting in the seats here. And you have our network loudspeakers within this space as well. And again, everything is connected to the network, and ultimately it's funneling through that next two system and still giving you that USB connection and that ease of connectivity. And I will say, from a standpoint of historically putting together a system like this it would be a lot more expensive for our customers to put together. And this now is really just allowing them to kind of have something, and especially if you're just, the MXA 920, that 30 by 30 foot coverage out of the box, expanding that even a little bit further, which are our coverage zones. I mean, again, that's not like breaking your brain complicated to do within our designer software. So it is something that is still, I would say, a real person could do this, So,
Ryan, you opened a can of worms a little bit, and we don't need to get lost in it. But I'm curious. This is a Joe Dunbar question now. So, in this kind of example, you're talking about bringing additional MX hardware into the system, which is great. I don't know if I just misunderstood you, but is there, in this example, I know we're not looking at like a line diagram or anything, right? But is there a P300 in here somewhere as well?
No.
Or will this all work through the MXW next to USB interface? So a P300 isn't necessary, or what would we need that to tie it together?
Absolutely. Just the MXW next to system for this type of install, where you have a single MXA 920 or a 901, and utilizing our speakers. All of this, there's going to be no P300 in this scenario. Obviously, there's going to be a network switch, but it is going to be ultimately funneling through that MXW next to system.
That is very forward thinking, and I certainly appreciate that. I know the end user wallets will appreciate that as well.
I will say this, something that was actually fascinating. I recently worked on a project where the customer said to me, "Hey, I want to do, I had this training room. I want to use the MXA 920. I was like, great, perfect. And I said, anything else that you're kind of looking to do? And they were like, at some point, we want to add having the ability to do presentations in this space and do ultimately trainings with utilizing some wireless, but we'll figure that out in the future. And because they said that, I said, look, I'm going to say something to you because this is just brand new. This was back like right when the next two system came out. And I was like, why don't, rather than buying a P300, buy the next two system? You don't even need to get the transmitters. Just get the access point, because it's one single 920 in the space and utilizing some of our network speakers. And I'm like, but you have it built in. When you want to add those, you just buy the transmitters that you want and you'll already just be ready to go. And they were like, deal, and so it worked out great.
That's an awesome example, and I appreciate you bringing it up. And that's saves a lot of money in not having to buy hardware that's not necessary. But the forward thinking there, so you can expand on it without having to invest extra money ahead of time, is definitely a win from the Shure team in my book. So I appreciate the clarification.
Absolutely.
And Joe, I would jump in real quick too and just mention that the other side of that is true, where let's say you already have an installed MXA 910 or 920 in a space. You could go back to those customers and they can add wireless now fairly inexpensively, and all that stuff is taken care of with that next to. So it kind of works both ways, forward thinking and also for installs that are already in there. This is another reason you could go back and revisit those installs.
Backwards compatible, dare I mean, sort of explains it. I appreciate the extra clarification there, and it just goes to show how dynamic and versatile this system it really is. So I appreciate that clarification, Chris.
Yeah. And this is a part of our larger ecosystem in terms of our Microflex ecosystem of products. So, just the ability to kind of utilize other things within that ecosystem. So it's a great addition. We're super excited about it. And again, it is just what it can do. I'm excited to kind of see the different ways this gets utilized. And again, something that is in our marketing so revolutionary, it deserves 2 mic drops. I just kind of love that. I was like, marketing does it sometimes good, this was one of them. So, and that's it for the next 2 system. And now we're going to shift to some partnership stuff.
I do have one question. Somebody anonymously asked and just wanted to know if the next 2 system is available and shipping today.
Yes.
I believe.
Yes.
All right. There you go. You didn't need to be a freak. Put your name on that, folks.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which, and also too, I mean, in something, it's like pricing is out there in terms of map. Like it's the map pricing for this system for an average 2-channel, unless if you're going with like some beta capsules or something like that. I mean, it's $2,500 for our end users. So it is very, very affordable for a 2-channel wireless system that offers everything that it does. So
yeah, especially with that kind of functionality. Fantastic price point.
absolutely. So yeah, and to shift a little bit to partnerships, something that is, I think, great for both Shure and Starin is our partnership with Neat, which then kind of goes into the whole, isn't that Shure? Shure is neat, that whole thing that people have been saying. So it's using both of them.
Puns right themselves, folks.
Yes, yeah. So yeah, have a field day with that. But the Neat Bar Pro and the Shure Microflex ecosystem, and this has been a great partnership. Obviously, we are all familiar with the use of all-in-one devices at the front of the room and how that is incredible for the spaces that it fits into. But when it gets into troublesome acoustics or larger spaces, it can be, I mean, we all just know how that can turn out. And so this partnership has been great in terms of Neat, but, think about all of like the all-in-ones and these appliances and how these systems can be utilized. But for the Neat, which with Starin both sells both Shure and Neat, so this is just a great partnership. It is wanting to kind of go over the ways that we work with them, and kind of like the simplest solution here, again, to kind of go over like what we were talking about the next 2 of like simple enough for real people. Like this is a scenario too with the Neat and Shure partnership that anybody can do. This is our MXA 902, which is our ceiling array as well as the integrated loudspeaker. And the use of our anti-USB, which is basically just kind of like that on and off board for that USB functionality and connection to ultimately the Neat Bar Pro. But within this, think about a scenario where you have a conference room that is 25 feet, 30 feet, but that table is within a 20 by 20 foot coverage, that is what the MXA 902 can pick up microphone wise, as well as speaker wise. There's a little wiggle room there, but that's where it works best. And you have that scenario where it's an executive boardroom and you want this to be heard. You want everybody to heard, especially the people at the head of the table. And this is a scenario where the Neat Bar Pro is covering, the video portion of it, but that MXA, 902 is everybody sitting at the table is kind of equidistant from that microphone and speaker. So that experience overall is better for everyone in the space as well as any remote participants. And I mean, this is basically as easy as, opening up our designer software, bringing in the 902, bringing in the anti-USB and pressing the auto route button and you're good. That's it, and you're ready to go. So this is kind of like the easiest and most straightforward of the solutions in terms of the partnership.
I don't want to exaggerate, but I'm telling you, Ryan, I get a ton of requests about like, hey, we have a partner and they've standardized on this platform, often Neat or whoever it may be.
Yep.
And it's like, yeah, we want to keep the user experience consistent throughout the whole place. We want them to be able to interact with the Neat tablet, the Neat pad, same way they do in all the other rooms. But now this room is bigger. And you mentioned about the head of the table, who is, generally going to be, the highest person in the hierarchy in the room and the furthest away. So being able to kind of bring in a tested, well-known, well-regarded microphone solution is definitely opens up the flexibility. And I will say for the systems integrators in particular, who we determine most of the folks on this call are, there's a bunch of confidence that now the systems integrators can instill in you as the manufacturer, Neat as the manufacturer, Starin as the distributor and supporter of the product, knowing that these things have been tested together and that they're going to work right. So I love to hear more about the partnerships. Looks like you've got a couple other examples here.
Yeah, yeah. So this is where you start to get into even like a larger space, like where, your more traditional, bigger training rooms, or again, in education, or, you start working into, those types of spaces and needing to cover them where you're now wanting to look at our MXA 920. And as you see here, it's up, 1 to 4 of our MXA 920s, utilizing our loudspeakers. And then in this scenario, it's not going to be the ANI USB, it's going to be the P300. But it's still, you're putting it all together. And again, at the end of the day, you're still having that USB connection going to the Neatbar Pro, where again, you're having that same functionality. You are using the Neat Pad. You're using so it's the same kind of experience, like you had said, for all of the other rooms. You now have that ability to kind of outfit even larger spaces, which is just super exciting.
I love the flexibility. We do have, I got too many windows going on at once. We got a question. Henry is asking about divisible spaces. If something, if a more powerful DSP is required in that place. I feel like you sort of just touched on this probably with talking about the P300. But at that point, we're probably going to have to step into something like that as opposed to the ANI USB, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. That's what I figured, and that's what the P300 would be for when you need a little more flexibility and a proper DSP.
I'll jump in real quick too. Divisible spaces can be challenging. There's a lot of other things to think about. And P300 gives you one USB connection point. If you're needing 2 USB connections points, for instance, that's the first thing to kind of think about. So,
yeah, I mean, honestly, when we get into that space, there's usually, we're at a weird point in AV right now, and this sort of just lends to a general discussion about, like, as the more advanced rooms are becoming less complex to deploy, and divisible spaces are now, I feel like the demand is really starting to drive up for these divisible and flexible spaces, but they haven't been as simplified as some of the other products and solutions have been over the last handful of years, right? So there's still quite a bit of complexity that comes into a divisible space. There's a lot of ways to skin that cat for sure. But certainly from an audio and pickup perspective, we've got that covered here. And P300 gives us a flexible, soft DSP that we can utilize in those applications.
Yeah. Which, you kind of hit the nail right on the head. I mean, I think we're moving in the direction of kind of having solutions that, because you start to just get into, especially appliance based, it's like, how do we connect all of that together? And make that seamlessly work, where usually, in a divisible space, we're having the conversation and of, what's actually being needed here. Is it 3 spaces that turn into one big one, and that's even different. So but in that scenario, a conversation with your Starin person, getting us on the horn with you, like, we'll be able to figure that out one way or the other, so that's just the most important thing to kind of go across there.
Got to dive into those a little bit, as they're called for, as they come up. Each one needs it's not as cut and dry. Yeah. Love it.
Yeah. And I think this last one here for the Neat partnership, we went in on this on the Next 2 system, where that larger install, where we have both, we want voice lift, we want that, internal, we want, be heard locally. We also want to have an audience mic pickup in the 920 or 901. And we want to have, obviously, some MXN speakers. So when the far end talks, and you want to have that whole setup, and that, again, utilizing that Swiss Army knife and utilizing the onboard DSP of the MXW Next 2 system. And this is now, a totally certified solution with Neat, where again, that USB connection from the Next 2 can accomplish all of that. So it gets really, really, whether you are just using the Next 2 system and a Neatbar Pro, or you're having this larger install, it's still going to be that same USB functionality and ease of setup in that way. So it's powerful partnership, and really, really excited about how this is playing out so far.
We've got some more questions piling in. Thank you guys. Keep them coming. I want to see, Roger wants to know if, I assume Roger, we're speaking about the next two stuff, if that stuff is compatible with, say Biamp or QSC, DSP solutions, or do we need to use a P300 with that? I'm sorry, not the P300, but how the next two stuff interacts with those, DSPs, if at all.
Yeah, you can come right in analog into anything. You can also come Dante out per channel, unprocessed. So it can be just your best standalone wireless system, regardless of whether you use the DSP on board or not. So
Got it.
analog connectivity or Dante connectivity direct to your favorite DSP if you choose to do that way. You bet.
Appreciate that, Roger. You'll have to let us know if I framed that one correctly, so we got the right answer. We did get a backup question from Sean about the next two, and I just want to go back to that before we get too far away from it. But Sean was just wondering, from the mics being plugged in, how much battery, like how long do the mics last? Do they vary based on the body pack or the hand pack?
Yeah.
Or are they just generally X amount of hours?
Yeah, so it does depend on which kind of, form factor you're using. But yeah, it's in between 17 and 28, depending that. So a full charge, I mean, yeah, it's all day,
Yeah. Yeah, Sean, if you're going longer than that, buddy.
That handheld is long enough. We can get more, a bigger lithium ion cell in there. So they're lasting more than 20 hours a day.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Well, I appreciate it, guys. Everyone keep the questions rolling in. We've got a couple here stacked up, but we'll save them for the right time. Let's talk Innovation Lab.
Yep. And now this is passing over to Criss.
Awesome. Yeah, we thought it'd be great to kind of give everybody a quick glimpse. If you didn't make it to InfoComm, our Innovation Lab at InfoComm, we introduced some new things that are coming in firmware. And probably the biggest thing to note is that these are free. These things that we're going to talk about are just the highlights of firmware updates coming, and they're for free. It's a firmware update. So starting off with the 920, just some highlights again about what's coming. We're going to introduce virtual acoustic boundary. And what is that? Well, oftentimes what happens here, what you're seeing on the screen is a U-shaped area that is our coverage zone. For those of you that have seen either the Web GUI or our designer software, you create coverage zones with an MXA 920. And we're seeing 3 different coverage zones there that form a U shape. Now we have a talker inside of one of those coverage zones. That's talker A. And when talker A talks, we deploy a lobe there. Everything works great. You hear him very nice and clearly on the far end. But the challenge is that when there's noise, whether it's another talker or any kind of noise that's outside of the coverage zone, like where talker B is located, their voice or that noise is acoustically in that same space already. So what happens in the way it currently works is that when talker B is talking, you can still hear them. They're muted. They're lower in level. They sound more distant, a little more muffled sounding, but you still hear them on the far end. Our aim with acoustic boundary is to completely eliminate any voice or any noise that is not in the coverage zone. So again, what we're showing here is that when talker B would talk, even though their voice is still acoustically in that space, we are able to remove that sound from the signal chain to the far end. Wow. So this is really, really cool. And what separates us from a lot of other companies that have tried to do this or that are doing this is that we're able to create coverage zones with the 920. You can draw in kind of where you want your coverage to be. Most other companies just have an area. And once you get beyond that area, like a big square, then it tries to deal with this. But there's not many companies that I know of that are doing what we're doing, allow you to put your coverage zone in and eliminate noise that's coming from outside of a coverage zone. That's pretty cool.
Criss, I gotta ask, and I mean, is this AI processing this and determining?
That is a great question.
How does this figure it out? If you don't have the answer, I'm not gonna break your back too much about it. But
this is not AI. This is strict DSP that's happening on board the MXA 920.
Okay.
So there's algorithms within the DSP circuitry that is doing this. So again, no, not AI. We're going to talk about AI in a little bit, but
Mm.
this functionality is not AI.
That's the segue for you. I love it. So you've not only basically got, where your lobe is set up and aimed and pointed and directed, that area is covered, but we specifically want to say if a noise comes from outside here, but it's still picked up inside here, ignore it.
Right. And this happens in our automatic coverage setup. So back to the everything's getting easier and
Yeah.
while being more complicated on the back end, as far as usability goes, this is automatic coverage. It's automatically deploying lobes into those coverage areas wherever somebody's talking. So you don't even have to deploy lobes anymore. It does it for you. And it gets rid of the stuff outside of those coverage zones for you.
Man, the technology, we work in it with it every day, and it continues to blow me away in the last handful of years how good it's gotten. And this is so cool to see. So is this a firmware update to our DSPs? Is this something built into the mics? Where do we see this functionality and how do we take advantage of it?
Yep, this firmware update should be hitting our site by the end of the month. So if you're using Shure, we have a little application called Update Utility. Make sure that the update utility is up to date first. And then secondly, check for new firmware. And it will download this new firmware. Like I said, we're very confident by the end of the month, probably even earlier than that this firmware will be available. It's free to download. You can deploy it into spaces that you've already installed 920s. If you're having a challenge or a problem, this could be helpful to update that firmware there.
Awesome. This looks cool. I'm excited to see it hit the proverbial shelves.
Yeah. And something that I just wanted to kind of also mention here is just the standpoint of at the innovation lab at Infocom. I mean, we actually were able to set this up as a live demo, which was pretty impressive, where we created a coverage zone in a kind of a presentation zone, and we ultimately cut that zone in half. And we were having a conversation when this was activated with someone who was in the coverage zone while we weren't. And then the playback is like a one-sided conversation, which again, we also have a video that we could send anybody that can kind of, yes, from a standpoint, because I mean, we're just telling you about it, but when you actually hear it in person, then it hits and it starts to really get the wheels grinding on like what could actually this be utilized in. And I mean, a big thing that I was saying during my innovation lab presentation was, how many times have I dealt with a customer that's like, look, we have this like kitchen area that we want to do an all hands meeting in, and no, we don't want wireless. We want a ceiling mic, and it's just historically you're like, that's just not going to be done. Where something like this, you can literally create the coverage zone that you want and avoid that area of, or doing it in like, we're a bullpen area, but you want to bring everybody into the center to actually do this meeting, and you can start to actually accomplish that with this. So it's pretty remarkable.
This one, I think it can't get any better.
Yeah.
Continues to.
Speaking of, just when it can't get any better, check this next one out.
What a segue.
There we go. This is 6.2 firmware coming to not just the 920, but also the MXA 901, which is the smaller format ceiling microphone array, the MXA 902, which Ryan talked a little bit about. Remember, that's a ceiling mic that has a loudspeaker integrated right into it. So it's both microphone and speaker.
Yep.
And the MXA 710. This next bit called voice activity detection is coming to all of those MXA products. So here's the scenario. We talked about previously what happens when something's happening outside a coverage zone. Well, what happens when something's happening inside the coverage zone? So we have talk array talking, and then we've got these potato chip bags and keyboard clicking and all that stuff going on. Well, today, the 920 could deploy a lobe there thinking that that's something that should be transmitted to the far end. It's noise, it's something going on. It's in the coverage area, right? We want to pick it up. The aim for this feature, voice activity detection, is what it just says. We're only going to deploy lobes where there are voice detected. So that noise we're looking to completely eliminate the noise that's in the coverage zone. So again, Joe, I know you're getting ready to ask, is this AI? No, this one is not AI. This is also purely DSP that's happening on board those MXA products. Now, some of you that are astute probably know about our DSP software called Intellimix Room. That has a circuitry called AI denoiser. And if you've seen the videos, that's pretty cool. I can crinkle a bag of potato chips while I'm talking, and it will aggressively remove noise from my voice. Okay. That's not what this is. If Talker A had a bag of potato chips and they were rattling it, that would get transmitted. This aims to get rid of the noise that's in the coverage area where there are no talkers talking. So hopefully that's clear on what the difference is.
Yep.
Again, purely DSP happening on board the devices. And that this, again, is called voice activity detection. I'll take it one step further. We've actually had this circuitry in our products for a while now, and it's actually been tied to camera tracking. So previously, we could, before there was ever voice activity detection, if there was noise, we could send that data, that location, to a camera tracking system, and the camera would want to train on wherever that noise was coming from. Well, that was bad, right? You don't want that. So we incorporated the circuitry in our camera tracking side of things so that we don't send false triggers. Well, now we've deployed it in the audio signal chain as well.
Wow. I get excited about new hardware always, but I really love that we've gotten to this age where firmware is continuing to update, not just new products, but continuing to update old products as well, that, when they fit within the spec or anything like that. So this is part of that same firmware rollout?
Exactly. Yeah. And there's a handful of other things coming as well that are really cool. The takeaway here for anybody that's deployed MXA products or MXA 920s is that this firmware update is like a new product. It's giving you, it's almost like rolling out a new product. So lots of cool stuff.
New features, improved functions and features. I love that we've reached this point in technology, and certainly appreciate the way y'all at Shure are applying it and rolling out updates like this.
Yeah. So I think the last thing before we roll into some any other questions that might be out there is we have mentioned Intellimix Room previously, and real quick, just to kind of give you the quick history here. Way back in 2016, when we introduced the MXA 910, we knew that processing array microphones were a bit of a challenge. You couldn't just use off-the-shelf DSP, or you had to be a little more careful. It wasn't as forgiving. That led us to create our own algorithms in the P300, that DSP that is a piece of hardware. But when we created those algorithms, we made them to be portable, purely software. And they've been deployed in other hardware. Like, for instance, the MXA 910 got a firmware update way back when that included AEC and noise reduction. The 920, of course, the 710, we've deployed this Intellimix type of feature set into hardware. But more importantly, we've made it completely software as well. By the way, Intellimix DSP is what's in that next two system as well. So you see that commonality thread throughout everything. But what if it was just purely software and it gets installed on that in-room compute, the thing that's already living in the room that does your Zoom room calls or your Teams rooms calls? Intellimix Room is meant to live right on that same compute. That frees up space. First of all, you don't have to have another DSP somewhere. Everything just becomes connected by a switch.
Smaller metal rack, huh?
Yeah, and that DSP is very powerful. We get to use the pure raw, processing power of the chipset that's in the computer now. We're not having to live on hardware that was designed a while ago and trying to deal with firmware updates and stuff. So I wanted to give you that quick highlight of the history of Intellimix Room and how we've gotten to where we are, because as you're going to see here on this next slide, we continue to push the boundaries of what's possible. Now we are talking about AI, okay? AI Deverb is coming to Intellimix Room, and it is a free upgrade. I'll step back once again. I mentioned We have AI denoiser. That circuitry is available in Intellimix Room. That's the thing that when I crinkle a bag of potato chips or click the keyboard, it removes that noise live from my voice. That's available in Intellimix Room. We're going to push the boundary more. How many people these days install conference systems into fish bowls?
Oh my gosh. Don't get me started, Chris.
I know all the glass and marble and hard surfaces everywhere. And it's the challenge, as we all know, is like that's a horrible acoustic environment, but our customers still want to do that. So how do we meet our customers where we are? How can we help innovate? And if we say the customer's strictly at the center of what we do, we've got to help them find solutions. So we have Deverb now circuitry built in, where literally what this does is it's looking, there's a deep neural algorithm inside of Intellimix Room that is looking at the signature of the reverb or the tail. It could be flutter echo if you have parallel walls. It could be flutter. It could be long reverb tails that are coming. What sets our product apart from others is that it's also looking at the character of the original sound. There are some competitive products to this out there, but they don't care about keeping the initial sound quality in check. It's only trying to get rid of that reverb or that tail, the bad acoustics part of that room. We're trying to preserve the original content as much as possible while also removing whatever flutter or reverb or whatever's happening in that room.
This is like a little bit of a Christmas present for me, just personally. I feel like, Chris, this is like one of my biggest frustrations with any microphone that isn't right near the sound source. I have my SM7 here. I'm inches away from it, if not less. I'm used to being in a studio, so I'm very much like, I'll get right on it. But when we get into the convenience that room mics or ceiling mics and table mics and those kinds of microphones offer, one of the things that comes with it is just room noise. And I'm not talking about ACs, and obviously there's been algorithms developed to kind of, denoise and take those things out of the equation. But there's space in the room. And you can hear that somebody is far away from the microphone. So I haven't heard this, folks, but you can tell I'm excited to. This is all part of that same firmware update?
Same firmware update, and it still costs no money.
Massive update, a bunch of new features. This does lead us into a question we got from Brett real quick on the new firmware update. Brett wants to know if the microphones, when doing firmware updates, will the microphones keep their settings? And along with that, how much time do you think a person should allocate when looking to do firmware updates for their customers?
Yeah, boy, that's a great question. The first part is absolutely the hardware should keep its settings unless something catastrophic happens. The microphone setup, however you have it set up, should remain the same. You should just see these new features revealed that you can turn on or off.
Got it.
If you have presets already set up, you're going to want to make sure you resave your presets. But, just like any good probably integrator going out to the field, the first thing you're going to want to do is download and save all those settings first, just in case. I mean, I don't think it's ever happened to Shure, but you might run into a situation where you do have to redeploy what you first did. So I do recommend that. Firmware updates, this firmware update, I think takes about, it's a big one. So I'm going to say it might take 5, 7, 8 minutes for it to completely be rebooted and ready to go.
I love it. I appreciate that. I imagine that's got to be a good size file.
Yeah.
Awesome. You guys, I'm going to slide this question in here. Our buddy Tim wants to know if Shure is working on a hardware DSP. That would support the same features as Intellimix Room software. That's a good question.
We get that question quite a bit, don't we, Ryan?
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
I feel like I put you guys in a tough spot. Now you got to answer it.
The answer is Shure is always innovating new products based on what it is that our customers need. How about that?
That's a great answer. So publicly speaking, Tim, we can't say there's anything in the works. We don't know that there's anything in the works. But ears are always open and the feedback is appreciated. That's the the tidy and clean answer we're gonna give. I
Yep,
love it.
there
Now I
you
want
go.
a Shure hardware DSP, you guys. But then you'd have to put it in a metal rack somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know. I appreciate it, folks. We've got about 6 minutes to go here. I want to make sure we get. Was that the last slide?
That was it. I mean, the last thing I was going to say there too is again, if anyone wants to see, I mean, there was a video for the voice activity detection as well, and as alongside some representation and some videos of the AI deverb. We just didn't want to take up the time to play these minute long, 2 minute long videos, depending on how the questions were. But it's something we can absolutely get to you too if you want to see some stuff.
Brian, do you have a link for those that we can share out? Is that what it is? So like a YouTube?
No,
Okay,
not at the
all right.
moment.
That's all right. That's all right.
But we'll try to get you something to where that could be like as easy as that.
That would be for sure nice to have. We do have one last question, folks. If you've got any last ones to get in for the last 5 minutes here, please do it now. At the moment, the final remaining question is from Matt Sperling. Matt wants to know, is there a partner portal where we can have our AV sales folks access to get trainings and these kinds of updates and things like that? Or what's the best avenue for those kinds of things, you guys?
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, go ahead, Ryan.
I was just going to say we have a few different ways that you can kind of access trainings. I mean, a huge one is our Shure Audio Institute SAI, which anybody can join. Like you can search that right now, Shure Audio Institute, and create a account there and begin to do these trainings on all of our products, which is something that we highly suggest. Integrators for sure, but end users, more and more of our end users are, I mean, we know how this goes. I mean, IT is starting to take more and more ownership of these whole systems. And so usually they're more than willing to, hop on and learn these things. So
sai.training.shure.com. I happen to be a member of the Shure Audio Institute and have some certifications from there. I can attest to what Ryan is saying that there's some very helpful information in there, especially if you're new to a series or a line of products or something. The trainings are worth a while because they will get all that base knowledge information into your head for you. The other one is the tech portal. Still a thing, you guys? The Shure Tech Portal, that is still a thing. So I will drop both of these links in the chat for everybody.
We don't have pricing there. That would be, you go through your Starin portal for that. But because I think that was part of the question, right?
I lost it. I don't remember, but that's all right. The Tech Portal is a great place for documentation and more technical kind of information like that.
Well, it strips away the whole marketing aspect of everything, all the pretty pictures of like flying by and all. It's just like, here's the 920, here's all the documents related to the 920. It really gets to the point very quickly.
It is an engineer's friend for sure. Yeah, we did get one last question. Somebody was asking if they can get release notes for the firmware update prior to the firmware update being released, or do they just come out at the same time? Is there any kind of like sneak preview?
No, they'll come out at the same time, because sometimes what happens is, like, what is that firmware today? It's right now, it's in approval. SV approval is what we call it. And something might happen where it has to change. So until that firmware actually hits the website for download, they don't have they don't have those updates available. But on the website, when you just search for firmware updates, it'll tell you all the history of whatever it was we fixed or bug things or whatever.
Right. I love you guys. I appreciate it. I think we got all the open questions answered. I do want we got 2 minutes. MV7 Plus, we got a lucky winner here, and it is going to go to Sean Boswell. Sean, thanks so much for joining us, and I hope you love this thing. I'm still on. It's not the world's oldest SM7, but I'm on a little bit of an old SM7, and I feel like maybe I need to trim down and go to the USB version to make my life easier. So let me know what you think of that, and maybe you'll convince me to make a change. Ryan, Criss, are you on LinkedIn? What's the best way for people to find you out there in the world? Obviously, we can help them get in touch with you.
Absolutely.
Yep.
LinkedIn.
LinkedIn is the place to be, you guys. I thank you guys so much for joining us today. Everyone for taking the time out. We hope you're liking these more and more. If you have anything else you'd like to see, please let us know. Ryan, Chris, thanks so much for the team at Shure for being with us. We will see you guys at the next one. Thanks so much.